Hi everyone, welcome to the Alternative RPG Club, and we are going to talk a little bit more about the Arkham Horror role-playing game today. This is a bit of a review of the system and the starter set. Let's begin. So, just a little context and a bit of my experience with the system. I actually ran it for a group of 5 players. We played about 3 sessions of 3 hours each. We ran the starter adventure, so pretty much we covered all the locations in the book. Most of the encounters as well. There was one optional encounter in the book that we didn't do. Um, I guess in case there are players here, I won't spoil what that optional encounter is, but yeah. And there are some puzzles that we did as well. Okay, so before we go into the review, I just wanted to explain how the game works. It's actually quite a simple system. Basically, at the start of every scene and at the start of your turn during combat, you go up your full dice pool, which is 6 over here. So you may be asking, these are the skills. So what you want to do is you actually get to choose how many dice you want to roll for each skill, and you're gonna need to roll. For example, if you wanna roll range combat for this character, you have to hit a 4+ for at least one of the uh, 4+ for at least one of the dice, and the more dice you hit 4+ with, the more successes you get, and sometimes you need multiple successes to do something essentially. So that's in general how it works. So for those abilities that you have 6+ on, you have to roll a 6, and you kind of want to dedicate more dice to that. Um, why would you, for combat, you roll everything most of the time, I guess. You might not want to roll everything for combat, because you might want to save something for a save that you are required to do. Like if a creature does an AOE attack, you have at least one dice to roll a save with. If you have no dice in your pool at all, you don't get to roll a save. So it pays to have at least one dice in your dice pool. For and also because at the start of combat you get to refill your dice pool, so it's really you want to spend as many dice as you can during combat. For narrative scenes though, you only refill your dice pool at the start of the each scene, so you can be a little bit more stingy with your dice there. There's also the insight mechanic, which you can use to mitigate some of these dice rolls. For advantage, your dice roll, basically what you do is, let's say I only roll 2 dice. Your advantage allows you to roll an extra dice and take the highest of the 3 dice that you're gonna roll. Disadvantage works the same way. So if I chose to roll 2 dice, I would 2 plus 1 dice, and I would take the lowest result if that was the disadvantage. Yeah, so that's how it works. Suppress a personality trait. So for insight, this personality trait thing is actually not really explained in the starter set. This is part of the official main game. So I have the PDF for the main game as well, and essentially, sometimes your phobias will cause you, or like your mental damage will cause you to take to perform a personality trait, a negative personality trait, and they all have some kind of mechanics for each personality trait. So you may have to run away, you may have to do perform certain actions, blah blah blah. But they are negative usually. Okay, that's basically how the system works for combat. What happens if you take damage, you start marking off your squares over here, your dice pool. So if I take 2 damage, I'll mark off 2, and then now when I at the start of my combat next round, I can only have 4 dice to choose from. Once I mark off everything here, you will roll you will do something called straining yourself, which will gain you a injury, which is a kind of status effect that will affect your character, and then yeah, you can kind of just go again. Yeah, that's pretty much how that works. Then yeah, for some of your equipment, like this guy's weapons, whenever you roll a one, you're gonna have to mark off like one of your usage for each one, and then you once everything is marked off, you have to spend an action to reload. Mm, so that's how that works. Uh, in general, there's one other thing as well. Horror damage. So usually in these kind of Lovecraftian games, there's something to do with mental damage or whatnot. And in this game, it's called horror dice. Essentially, what happens if you take mental damage is you take the amount, you change the dice to something called a horror dice, which is just like a regular d6. So this game is best played with two colors of dice. One is your regular dice pool, and maybe one is another color for your horror dice, essentially. So let's say you have six in your pool now. You take one horror damage. You replace one of your regular dice with the horror dice, and whenever you roll that horror dice, if it hits a one, you trigger like an insanity thing, and you roll on the table, and something happens. So that's how horror in this game works. And I think with that, you pretty much have all the information you need to play this game. And I hope this gives some context to some of the things I'm going to talk about later on. So let's talk about things that I liked about the game first. First of all, I think the starter adventure is quite well thought out. The entire adventure is kind of written in a way where the GM can kind of read the book and teach the game as it goes along. There are some suggestions in the book as well to what to do if players do certain things and blah blah blah. So I thought that was pretty good. They've obviously done a bit of playtesting, and for players who have unconventional methods of resolving things, they have some suggestions in the book on how to deal with that. And for a new GM, that's always a good thing. Um, if this is a game where if your players really like rolling a lot of dice, this is a game for them because you can roll up to six dice on your character sheet at a time, and sometimes you can roll even more. So that is a good thing, I guess. Fans of the Arkham or Eldritch horror game or the LCG will also see a lot of familiar characters if they are already involved in those games. Especially from Circle Unbound, if you're playing Arkham Horror LCG, a lot of the PCs that you will see in the game or the pre-generated characters are from Circle Unbound for some reason. So there you go. Next thing also is the starter set specifically has some really great components, very high quality maps, tokens, and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool. So I think I like the effort, and the quality components are pretty good. The only thing I would say is a lack of a map of Arkham is a bit of a shame. Definitely would have liked that. And also, the game, at least the starter set itself, does come with some puzzles. It's nothing too crazy. It's just like one of those cube things where you slide things around to create a certain shape, blah blah blah. So if you like those kind of things, sure. But otherwise, I do feel it's a bit of a gimmick. I personally I don't really love puzzles in my RPG, so take it or leave it. We didn't use the puzzles at the end in this game just to save some time. Even though we played 3 sessions or 3 hours, there were parts where we had to rush through certain things. So yeah, I would say 3 sessions of 3 hours may be uh, just about the right time if you're gonna plan this out with your friends. Um, Otherwise, yeah. What I didn't like about this game, so I think it is too forgiving personally, which is quite surprising. I know the intention for this game was was it to have more of a pulp lean to it, but that's very contrary to the board game, the Arkham Horror board game or LCG. Those games are really hard to survive and hard to survive essentially. So I do find the tonality a little bit weird shifting to this one. And also, generally horror games itself, this one of the sources of horror is the longevity of your character. And in this game, it takes a lot for your character to die. So I do feel like it's quite hard to die. So I didn't really explain dying. So every time you refresh your pool, right, you strike off one, and sorry, every time you strike off your pool, you gain an injury, and I believe, do I have the injury table here? Yes, yeah. So this is the injury table that you roll. So every time you take an injury, so basically once you've strained out, you all your dice are used up. You roll a d6 on this table plus one for each existing injury. For you to die, you need to roll a 10 or 11. So that means even if I roll, assuming I roll a maximum of a d6, I need like four injuries before I have any fear of dying, uh, which is kind of insane. And yeah, your PCs are basically almost superheroes. It's gonna be very difficult for them to die. Uh, the other thing is when you get injured, some of these injuries are a lot worse for your players than other injuries. So there is one in particular. I think it's yeah. It's only the third one, nasty cut. You're bleeding badly. You cannot increase your dice pool limit by means of time, normal healing, or straining yourself until the injury is healed. So essentially, you can't heal back your dice pool, which limits your actions, and it's quite bad. Yeah. It has a very snowbally effect if if you get certain things. Um, on the contrary, if you roll like loss of sense, you this one disables one of your senses between sight, smell, or hearing. But there are no mechanics to support this. So there's nothing in the book that says, oh, if you lose your sight, you roll with disadvantage on attacks or anything like that. So I don't know. It's kind of weird that this is here while this is such a strong one and it's like number three. Um, this is just weird. And if you roll smell, that's like whatever, it doesn't really matter. Um, yeah, so that's one of the examples of why I feel that this game is too forgiving. Players can also very easily cheese the mechanics. So the way it works is for your monsters is that they, let's say they have like a dice pool of four, enemies attack them, they go down to like a dice pool of one. So monsters, if they are minions, they cannot strain themselves, so they just deal four damage and they die. But for your more elite characters, they can strain themselves, and the best tactic that your players would probably figure out is to bring the elite characters, get a good hit to the elite characters, and leave them with like one or two dice while they take care of all the mobs, and yeah, and then your big boss guy can't really do anything, right? He's only rolling like two dice a turn for each combat, and that I feel that's a bit of an oversight in the design. It's very easy to cheese. So when we played the game, I house ruled it so that if you are down to like one or two dice, you can just strain yourself right away, even though you're not supposed to be able to do that in the game. So I feel like even for the play on the player side, if you're down to just like one or two dice, sometimes it feels it feels quite bad to do that. Have your actions limited. Um, so yeah, I just let them refresh their dice, and of course um, pay the costs of the injury rolls and stuff like that. Next thing is the dice pool mechanic. Design wise, I feel like the intent, at least what is mentioned in the book, is that the intent is that the dice pool mechanic exists in the narrative sections of the game because they want to limit the amount of time each player has, or at least like have and to try and ensure that each player has an equal playtime or spotlight during the game. Um, but in practice, I feel that it seems very counterproductive. Um, if I fail the role, then everyone's gonna try and do that role. Um, it doesn't seem very necessary also because the rules in narrative is if you run out of dice in your dice pool, you just refresh your dice pool anyway. So I am not sure why this rule is even there in the first place. Um, Maybe it's just to limit the amount of dice that you can roll for a skill check, but still, rolling 6 dice on a skill check is pretty good. It kind of almost guarantees a success if you want to look at it that way. So weird, weird rule for narrative scenes. And for combat, I think I already mentioned sometimes you're down to like 1 or 2 dice. It's very difficult to for your characters to do anything. It's a bit feels bad. Combat is also a slog. I feel of even though it sounds like people die relatively quickly, but I feel that um yeah, just because your enemies can also strain, sometimes it takes a long time for characters to actually kill non-minion creatures or other or characters. The game kind of shortcuts this by just telling you, the GM, to be like, hey, if this guy's the only one left, um, just kill him earlier. Which is a bit of a cop out, I think. But there you go. I think the combat took too long, and it was very obvious a lot of times that the players would gain the upper hand. I even scaled up some of the combat encounters as well. I added more enemies and things like that to make things a little bit more difficult. But if your characters are spec'd a certain way, um, they can easily take control of the combat situation. Yeah, and my one of my biggest things is the trauma and injury tables. Um, in this kind of investigative eldritch horror type of game, I feel like you're gonna have those moments outside of combat in narrative where you see like a creepy shadow or you experience some kind of violence or whatever that's going to affect your mentality. There aren't there, and you can just give them horror dice and whatnot. But if you actually look at the trauma and injury tables, a lot of them have to do with combat. So it doesn't really affect you during the narrative scene. Like this, the horrors you've been exposed to leave you unable to react or respond. You must discard all your dice in your dice pool if possible. You have no dice in your dice pool to discard. You must add one to the results of any blah 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 blah. Um, Here's the thing though. Uh, if this happens to you, yeah, it's not really a big deal. Uh, you just don't do anything for that particular scene. Once you move to like a next room, it's a new scene, so you can do things again. And the dice pool, as I said, doesn't really matter in a narrative scene because you're supposed to refill it anyway once it's all gone. So yes, that's the thing. Also, the injuries and trauma tables are actually different in the starter set. This is the one from the rule book itself. I used for the adventure. I used trauma and injury tables from the starter set, and I think I faced the same problems. Yeah, I faced the same problems. So yeah, at least this one allows you to, trigger your negative side of your personality trait, for your traumas. But looking at some of these personality traits, I think it can be quite difficult to contextualize into certain situations. Let's say your negative personality trait is I can't remember what they have specifically, but they're all like, let's say, claustrophobia or whatever. Let's say it's claustrophobia, but you're in the middle of the desert, and a snake, you're just frightened by a snake, and you trigger the horror thing. Now, how are you going to flavor that? It seems a little bit difficult to do so. So yeah. The other thing is, let me find a good one. Yeah, so like shocked, you just discard one dice pool from your dice from your dice pool. Um, it's a very small cost. So I feel like it's just not great. There is one trauma in the trauma table for the starter set that it's you cannot move towards the source of your fear, which I think it's one of the earlier conditions on the table. Um, yeah, and that just doesn't have any implications for narrative during a narrative scene. Um, Maybe if you're afraid of a door or something that you have to go through, you can't really go in there or whatever. But again, like you see, uh, a lot of these traumas are very soft blows, and they don't feel serious or the mechanics are not really supportive for anything that's not in combat. Um, I don't really like any of them. The injuries also, like I mentioned, some of these are a lot worse than others. Uh, yeah, they're just not great, and it takes a lot to uh, put your character in any form of danger at all, which I think diminishes the horror element a lot. So, lastly, would I recommend this? I would say probably not. I do feel like if you want to play a pulpy Cthulhu thing, there's already Pulp Cthulhu that's out there. And the good thing about that Pulp Cthulhu game is that it shares a lot of mechanics with original the main version Call of Cthulhu. So if you want to switch it up, your tone and stuff like that from time to time, you can very easily do so. Yeah, you can just get your players to create new characters. It kind of works almost the same way. It's the same skeleton. So yeah, Pop Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu, um, would be my recommendations. Um, I think my main problems with this Arkham Horror RPG is that the combat is just too sluggish. The dice mechanic, well, at first sounds cool, doesn't really work for me. Um, and I think it's a little bit too soft on the trauma tables and injury tables. And yeah, anyway, that is my review for Arkham Horror RPG. If I were to give it a rating, I don't really want to give RPGs ratings because at the end of the day, I there's an RPG for everyone. So maybe this RPG, even though I see all these things as flaws, some table out there may be like, oh, this is great for me, and I hope going on some for my reviews, I'm just gonna talk about what I like, what I didn't like, and you guys decide, if it's for you or not. But for me, it's definitely a no for Arkham Horror RPG. I'll stick to the LCG, which is quite fun. But anyway, that's all for me. Nicholas from the Alternative RPG Club, signing off. See you soon.